Mira stood outside her small shelter while the sky changed faster than she could understand. Only moments before the air had carried a warm and peaceful feeling. Now the wind started to twist into wild circles and dark clouds rolled over the foot of the settlement like a giant wave. People shouted warnings and doors swung open as families ran inside. Mira held her baby close against her chest as the first flash of blue light cut across the sky. It felt like the storm was not made by nature. It felt angry. It felt alive. Her baby cried softly as the wind pushed against them. Mira tried to calm the child with a whisper, but her own voice shook. She had seen storms before, but never anything like this. The sky looked shredded and the ground trembled as if something under the earth wanted to break free. She turned back toward the shelter. The walls were old and thin, yet it was the only place she could hide. She stepped inside and shut the wooden door. The sound of the storm grew louder, as if the walls did nothing to block it. Rain slammed against the roof with heavy fists. The wind howled like a creature calling for her. Mira pulled a blanket around her baby and rocked gently, hoping the sound of her heartbeat would help the child rest. But the baby only cried harder. Mira felt fear tighten in her chest. A bright flash lit the room and the door shook violently. Something struck the side of the shelter. Another blow followed. The entire structure shivered. Mira lowered herself to the floor and curled her body around her baby. She prayed the storm would pass, but instead it grew stronger, outside the settlement. People screamed as metal tore and roofs flew into the sky. The storm swallowed every sound until only the roar of the wind remained. Mira felt the floor tilt under her. She knew the shelter might not survive. The roof cracked open. A wide beam of cold light fell across the room. For a moment, Mira could see the swirling wall of the storm outside. It looked like a giant spiral of smoke mixed with shards of light. She pressed her baby close. The roof tore away in one violent pull. Rain poured in like a waterfall. Mira screamed for help as she rolled to shield the child. But the storm answered with another attack. The wall behind her collapsed. Wood and dirt rained down. She tried to crawl, but the force of the wind dragged her backward. The baby slipped from her arms. Mira reached out with every bit of strength she had, but her fingers closed on empty air. Sharp gust of wind lifted the child from the floor. For one terrible instant, Mira saw her baby rising into the chaos wrapped in light and rain. She screamed the child's name until her throat burned. Her body shook as she pushed through the debris, but the storm struck again. The ground gave way. Mira fell onto her side, and pain ran through her leg. She could not reach the baby. She could barely breathe. The last thing she saw before losing her grip on consciousness was a shadow inside the storm. A tall shape walked steady, even as everything around it broke apart. It reached toward the floating child. The storm's light wrapped around the figure but did not touch it. Mira's vision blurred. She hoped it was real. She hoped it was human. Then everything went silent. When she opened her eyes again, the storm was almost gone. The sky was turning pale gray. Her shelter was destroyed. The ground was covered in broken beams, twisted metal, and bags of food ripped open by the wind. Mira's body felt heavy as she dragged herself upright. She called her baby again and again. No answer came. She searched the ruins, crying out until her voice faded. She believed the storm had taken her child forever. The guilt crushed her chest. The world around her felt empty. It felt dead. Then she heard it. Slow, steady footsteps. They echoed through the debris like someone walking with purpose. Mira froze. No one from the settlement could walk that calmly after the storm. She wiped the rain from her eyes and looked toward the sound. A figure stepped out from behind the broken remains of a tower. Mira's breath caught. Someone was holding a small bundle in their arms. Mira stood trembling as the figure holding the small bundle stepped closer. Her heart beat so hard that she felt it in her throat. Rain dripped from her hair and her clothes clung to her skin. She tried to speak, but her voice broke apart. The figure did not stop walking. It moved with steady steps like the storm had not touched it at all. Then a sudden gust of wind pushed a curtain of dust between them, and the figure vanished. Mira ran forward as fast as her injured leg allowed, yet when she reached the open ground, no one stood there. The footprints that could have led her to the stranger were washed away by the last drops of the storm. Her hope fell into darkness again. The settlement lay in ruins. Houses that once held laughter now sat broken like hollow shells. The air carried the smell of wet earth and burnt metal. Trees lay bent across the road as if a giant hand had brushed them aside. Mira stared at the destruction and felt a wave of helplessness surround her. She called for her baby again, but only the soft drip of rain answered her. Then she heard voices. Survivors gathered near the central well where a few structures still stood. Mira limped toward them. Faces covered in dirt turned to look at her. Some showed relief. Others carried silent grief for what they had lost. Mira asked them if anyone had seen her baby. Most people shook their heads slowly. A few whispered that the storm had taken many lives. Mira felt her knees weaken. She pressed her hand against the well wall to keep from falling. Then an old woman touched Mira's arm. Her eyes held a strange fear. She told Mira that during the height of the storm she had seen something walking near the edge of the settlement. A tall figure that moved as if the wind did not exist. Light from the storm touched the figure yet never harmed it. Mira asked who it was. The old woman said she could not see the face, yet she believed it looked human. A spark of fragile hope lit within Mira. She asked the survivors if they saw the figure carrying anything. They looked at each other with uncertainty. One man said he saw something small in the stranger's arms, but the stormlight made everything confusing. Another survivor said the figure vanished into the haze like it stepped through a hidden doorway. Mira felt her breath quicken. She repeated her child's name over and over in her thoughts, praying that the stranger held her baby, and not some illusion created by the storm. Mira knew she could not stay still. She needed to follow any sign of the stranger. She walked beyond the well and searched the muddy ground with desperate eyes. The earth was soaked and the scattered debris made the path uneven, yet Mira pushed forward. Every broken board and bent pipe reminded her of the life that had stood here only hours ago. Now the world looked ancient and wounded. As she reached the far edge of the settlement, she noticed something strange. The storm had left deep scars across the land, yet there was a narrow path where the mud seemed perfectly smooth. Too smooth. As if something heavy had pressed through, but without causing chaos around it. Mira knelt and brushed her hand along the surface. It felt warm though the air was cold. She followed the smooth trail. It led toward the hills that bordered the settlement. Birds sat silent on branches as if fearing to break the heavy stillness lingering in the air. Mira's injured leg throbbed with each step, but she refused to stop. She whispered to the wind that she would find her child no matter what stood in her way. Ahead she saw a toppled tower from the old watchpost. Part of it still glowed with a faint blue pulse. No natural storm could make metal glow like that. She placed her hand near the light and felt a gentle hum beneath her skin. It reminded her of machines from stories told by traveling engineers. Machines built by humans long ago before war and broken worlds scattered knowledge everywhere. Mira searched around the tower and found a single deep footprint pressed into the wet ground. It was larger than a normal human footprint and shaped with sharp edges as if reinforced by metal. Yet the shape still looked human. The sight made her heart thunder with fear and hope at the same time. Someone had been here. Someone strong enough to walk through a deadly storm. Someone who carried her baby. Mira lifted her head and stared toward the distant hills. The trail continued in that direction. She tightened her grip on the torn blanket she carried and took a steady breath. The world might be broken, She might be alone. Yet her mission was clear. She would follow the trail until she reached the one who took her child. Mira followed the trail into the open hills where the storm clouds still drifted like wounded beasts across the sky. The air felt heavy as if the storm had left behind a memory that refused to fade. Each step sent a sharp ache through her injured leg, yet she forced herself forward. Her heart carried only one thought. She would not leave her baby in the hands of a stranger, no matter who or what that stranger was. The path grew narrow and the ground turned uneven. Strange grooves crossed the soil in long straight lines. They looked like marks made by machines, yet Mira had never seen a machine large enough to cut such deep tracks. Birds watched her from high branches, their wings still trembling from the force of the storm. Mira raised her eyes toward the hilltop and felt a chill across her spine. Something waited beyond her sight at the base of the next hill she found. A broken fence made from old metal panels. Most pieces had rusted away long ago, yet one panel shone with a faint gray glow. Mira touched it gently. A soft pulse of warmth traveled through her fingers and into her arm. It felt like the panel tried to wake from a long sleep. She stepped back in fear and wonder. If the storm created this glow, then the storm held secrets beyond nature. If the stranger created it, then he carried the knowledge of a world long lost. Mira pressed onward. The trail grew clearer as she moved through tall grass that had been flattened by a powerful force. Each blade lay in perfect direction, as if something had walked through without breaking a single one. No human moved with such precision. Mira whispered her baby's name again and again. Her voice drifted across the hills like a small cry for hope. Ahead she saw the remains of an old research post. The walls had collapsed years ago, leaving only metal ribs sticking out from the ground. Yet inside the skeleton of the ruins, Mira sensed something alive. A soft light flickered under a shattered roof beam. She stepped inside. Dust rose around her with each footstep, creating a thin haze that caught the light. Mira knelt beside the flicker and found a small device half buried in dirt. The device looked like a circular stone, yet its surface was too smooth, too perfect. When she brushed away the dirt, the device responded to her touch. Light spread across its surface like water waking in sunlight. Mira stared in shock as an image rose from the device. A figure stood inside the beam of light, tall, strong, and human in shape. It held a small bundle close to its chest. The bundle moved slightly like a sleeping child breathing in gentle rhythm. Mira reached toward the image. Her fingers touched only air, yet her heart felt the truth. That was her baby. She knew it with every part of her soul. Tears filled her eyes. Not from pain, not from fear, but from fierce hope. The image shifted and showed the figure walking through the storm, while broken metal flew around it without touching its skin. The light faded and the device fell silent again. Mira stood and looked across the horizon. She now knew the stranger was real. He was not a shadow or a trick of the storm. He existed. He walked through destruction with a purpose that she did not understand. Yet he carried her child as if the baby mattered more than anything else in the world. She left the ruins and followed the direction shown in the image. The land ahead dipped into a valley filled with fog. The trail entered the fog and vanished. Mira hesitated. Fog could hide anything. For all she knew, the stranger might not be alone. Still, she stepped into the white curtain because staying behind meant losing her child forever. Inside the fog, the world grew quiet. Her footsteps barely made a sound. The air carried a faint vibration, as if distant machines worked beneath the earth. Mira lifted her head and saw a tall structure rising through the mist. It looked like an old signal tower, yet the top of it glowed with the same color she saw in the device. She moved closer. Under the tower she found another footprint, deep, strong, and shaped like the first one. It told her the stranger had stood here not long ago. She touched the print with trembling fingers. The ground still held warmth. Mira lifted her eyes to the white sky. She whispered a promise to her baby that she would not stop until she held the child again. Then she turned and followed the trail. Deeper into the valley where secrets waited, and the stranger walked ahead with steps too perfect to belong to any normal human. The valley grew darker as Mira walked deeper into the fog. The white curtain shifted around her as if it breathed with a life of its own. Each step forward felt like entering a secret world hidden away from every human map. She tightened her grip on the torn blanket she carried. It was the last warm memory of her child, and she held it close to steady her heart. The faint vibration in the air became stronger. It felt like the ground whispered through her boots. She paused and listened. The sound rose and fell in a slow rhythm like the heartbeat of a giant machine buried under the earth. Mira stood still and looked around for any sign of movement. Nothing answered her except silence. Then a soft humming drifted through the fog. Mira turned sharply. The sound came from the right side of the valley where giant stones formed a broken arch. She approached the arch slowly. The stones were smooth and shaped as if carved by human hands, yet no village near her settlement had ever built anything like this. The air around the stones pulsed with low blue light. Mira stepped beneath the arch. The ground vibrated again. A spark of light jumped from the surface of the stone to the torn blanket in her hands. Startled, she dropped the blanket. The spark burst into a thin line of blue fire that floated in the air for a moment before fading. Mira bent down to pick up the blanket. When she lifted it, she saw a glowing mark on the ground where the spark had fallen. The mark shaped itself into a circle, then into a line that grew longer by the second. Mira stepped back as the line stretched outward, forming a strange pattern. The pattern reminded her of maps drawn by old travelers, though this one looked like a living map made of shifting light. The lines joined and spread until they created the outline of a building with a tall roof and long pillars. Mira watched as the image of the stranger appeared inside the glowing shape. He stood in the doorway of the building holding her baby close. The image faded and the pattern remained glowing softly like a trail, waiting to be followed. Mira placed a hand against her chest. She felt fear and hope fighting inside her, yet hope pushed stronger. The stranger was guiding her. This message did not feel like a warning. It felt like a path. She followed the glowing pattern as it stretched toward the far side of the valley. The fog shifted and parted where the light moved. Mira walked with cautious steps. The valley floor changed under her feet. Instead of mud and broken stones, the ground became smooth metal covered by a thin layer of dust. Mira brushed the dust away with her boot. Under it, she saw an old symbol shaped like a circle with 3 lines inside. She had seen drawings of that symbol in stories told by traders who spoke of ancient human scientists. The fog lifted as she reached the end of the glowing path. Before her stood a tall building, half buried in the hillside. Metal pillars rose from the ground like the bones of a giant. The entrance stood open, though the door looked heavy enough to withstand storms and fire. Above the doorway, the same ancient symbol shone with faint blue light. Mira stepped closer. The air around the entrance hummed softly. Her heart beat faster. She felt that this building held answers. It held truth. And maybe it held her baby. Inside the doorway, a small device lay on the floor. It looked like a thin metal disc shaped like a leaf. Mira knelt beside it. Before she even touched it, the disc activated. Light rose from its surface, forming a clear image of the stranger. He stood inside the building, speaking silent words. Mira could not hear him. She could only see his calm, steady eyes and the strong way he held her child. The image flickered, then showed a storm machine hidden deep within the hills. The machine burned with bright white light. After this, the image displayed a single direction. Arrow pointing downward toward a set of stairs behind the doorway. The light vanished. The disc turned dark again. Mira rose to her feet. She looked at the stairs. The darkness below felt cold and endless, yet she knew this was where the stranger wanted her to go. A message shaped by light, a direction shaped by truth. She wiped the dust from her hands and took a breath that trembled with fear and determination. Then she stepped inside the building and walked down into the darkness where answers waited, and where the path of the stranger grew sharper with every step. The stairs led Mira deep into the earth. Each step echoed against metal walls that felt too smooth and too perfect to belong to any settlement she had ever known. A faint blue glow ran along the ceiling, guiding her path like a silent guardian. The air grew cooler the deeper she moved. The silence felt heavy, as if the building itself listened to her steps. At the bottom of the stairs, she reached a wide hallway shaped like a long tunnel. The walls held marks and symbols she did not understand. Some looked like drawings of storms with twisting shapes that rose into the sky. Others showed tall human figures standing inside rings of light. Mira walked slowly and studied the symbols. A thought pressed into her mind. This place was not built by villagers or old-world workers. It was built by humans who knew things far beyond her world. She reached a heavy door that had slid open just enough for her to pass. Inside lay a large chamber filled with dim light. Broken machines sat in rows like sleeping giants. Wires crawled across the floor like dried vines. Yet some machines still glowed with faint blue life. Mira felt a strange vibration on her skin as she stepped inside. The chamber felt alive even though everything seemed half dead. In the center of the room, a tall glass pillar stood upright. Inside the pillar floated a thin sheet of light. Mira stepped closer. The sheet shifted and formed an image. It showed a human body, but not one like hers. This one looked stronger. The bones were marked with symbols. The muscles glowed with energy. The skin was reinforced by thin lines of metal that followed natural shapes. At the bottom of the image she saw old text in a language she could not read. Yet one word repeated again and again: Stormwalker. Mira felt her breath freeze. The stranger from the storm. The figure that walked through destruction without fear. The one who carried her baby. He was not a normal human. He was a stormwalker. A human made for storms. A human designed to survive what no one else could. She placed her hand on the glass. The image changed again. Now it showed a row of stormwalkers standing inside this very chamber. They waited silently as machines swirled around them. One figure stepped forward. Mira recognized the shape, the same tall build, the same calm posture, the same presence she had seen in the message of light. This was him, the one who took her child. The pillar of glass dimmed. A voice filled the room, though Mira saw no speaker. The voice sounded old and thin, like a machine speaking from a memory long forgotten. It said that the Stormwalker program was created to protect humanity from storms born through failed machines. It said only a few Stormwalkers survived after the old world fell. Their purpose was to stop storms before they reached human homes. Their purpose was to save lives. Mira stepped back in shock. If the stranger was one of the last stormwalkers, then why did he walk into the storm instead of breaking it apart? Why did he carry her baby? Why did he leave without speaking to her? The questions pulled at her until her head felt heavy. She moved deeper into the chamber where control panels lined the walls. Dust covered most surfaces, yet one panel glowed softly. Mira brushed the dust away with her hand. The panel lit up fully, and an image rose from it. This time it showed a storm machine hidden under the hills. The machine glowed with dangerous power. The image then showed the stranger standing near the machine with her baby held safely in his arms. The storm around them bent away from him, as if afraid to touch him. Then the image changed again. It showed a symbol that Mira had never seen before. A small circle with a single dot in the center. The moment she saw it, she felt a strange pull inside her chest. Something told her the symbol meant something important about her child. The image, Fated before she could learn more, Mira looked around the chamber. She needed answers, yet this room spoke only in pieces of truth. She turned toward the exit, yet stopped when she saw a faint trail of footprints across the metal floor. They were the same deep, sharp prints she had followed in the valley. The stranger had walked through this chamber not long ago. She followed the footprints toward a door on the far side. The door stood open, as if waiting for her. Beyond it, another staircase led upward. Mira tightened her grip on the torn blanket and took a steady breath. She had learned who the stranger was. A storm walker, a human who should not exist. A protector made from a forgotten age, yet she still did not know why he had taken her child. Mira stepped through the door and climbed the stairs, ready to face whatever truth waited above, even if that truth changed everything she believed about human storms and the future of her child. Mira climbed the stairs with slow, careful steps. The air grew warmer with each rise, as if the world above carried a hidden fire. Her heart beat hard against her ribs. She had walked through storm's ruins and old secrets, yet none of those trials felt as heavy as the moment waiting at the top of the stairs. She felt it in her bones. She was close to the truth, close to the stranger, close to her child. The stairs opened into a narrow metal hallway. Blue lights flickered along the walls like weak stars trying to stay alive. The floor vibrated under Mira's feet. She followed the hallway until it ended at a wide steel door. The door stood half open. A soft golden light shone through the gap and spilled across the floor. Mira stepped toward the gap and pressed her hand against the cold metal edge. She pushed the door open and entered a large chamber filled with warm, bright light. The air smelled clean, as if untouched by storms or dust. In the center of the chamber stood a tall figure, the stranger, the stormwalker. He stood with his back to her. His armor-like skin glowed with faint silver lines that pulsed slowly like a living heartbeat. In his arms, he held her baby. Mira froze. Tears filled her eyes before she took a single breath. Her child slept peacefully, wrapped in a soft cloth that looked new and warm. The stranger stood silent, as if waiting for her to gather her strength. Mira stepped forward and her voice rose from deep inside her chest. "Give me my baby." The stranger did not move. Mira took another step, her injured leg trembling under her weight. She reached her hands out. The stranger finally turned his head. His eyes glowed with soft blue light, yet they held no threat, only calm purpose. He lifted the child a little higher so Mira could see the gentle rise and fall of the small chest. "Your child is safe," the stranger said. His voice sounded steady like a deep echo inside stone walls. Mira stopped again. She wanted to run forward, yet fear held her still. She asked the question that burned inside her heart. "Why did you take my baby?" The stranger stepped closer. His movements carried the smooth strength of someone shaped for survival. He held the baby with great care. He spoke again. "The storm that struck your home was not natural. The machine that created it has awakened after a long, silent age. I entered the storm to reach the core before it destroyed every life in your settlement." Then I heard your child cry. Mira felt a sharp pull inside her. She asked why he saved the child instead of stopping the storm. The stranger lowered his gaze toward the sleeping baby. "Your child carries a rare human trait," he said. "A trait linked to the machines of the old world. The storm machine recognized this trait. It tried to draw the child into its light. I had to take the child before the storm reached its peak, or the machine would have consumed this small life." Mira felt her legs grow weak. She moved forward until she stood only a few steps away. She reached toward her baby. The stranger held the child out to her. Mira lifted her baby into her arms and held the small body close. Warmth filled her chest. Relief shook her entire being. She whispered softly to calm the child, though the baby slept without fear. She looked up at the stranger again. "Why would a storm walker care for my child?" Why help me? The stranger stepped back. His silver lions glowed brighter for a moment. I was made to protect humans, he said. I lost many in battles against storms and broken machines. When I saw your child in danger, I knew I had to act. This child is important for the future of humans and for the world that lives beyond the storm. Machines. Mira felt confusion and fear twist inside her. Important how? The stranger pointed toward a tall screen at the far end of the chamber. Mira turned. The screen lit up and showed an image of a storm machine deep under the hills. Its core burned bright. Symbols around the image shifted and formed. The same small circle with a dot she had seen earlier. Your child holds the same mark, the stranger said. This mark links to the old system that controls storms. Only a human born with this trait can shut down the storms forever. The child must live. The child must grow. Humans must protect this gift. Mira pulled her baby closer. She felt both fear and fierce pride rise within her. She looked at the stranger. What must I do now? The stranger lifted his head. We will stop the next storm, he said. Together, the lights in the chamber brightened as if the building itself heard his words. Mira felt her fear turn into strength. She nodded once. A mother, a stormwalker, a child with power hidden in blood. The future had begun. Mira stood with her baby held tight against her chest while the stormwalker faced the glowing screen. The chamber hummed with deep rising energy that seemed to move through the metal walls like a slow heartbeat. Mira felt the weight of the stranger's words pressing inside her mind. Her child held a gift that could silence storms forever. A power no one had ever spoken of in any village anywhere. The stranger stepped toward her. His silver lines glowed with steady, calm light. The next storm is already forming, he said. The machine under the hills has awakened stronger than before. If we do not act now, the next storm will destroy every settlement near this valley. Mira felt fear pierce through her, yet strength rose beside it. Her child breathed softly in her arms. Mira looked down at the tiny face and felt a fierce truth. She would protect this child, and she would fight for her people, no matter what waited. Outside, the stranger walked to the far side of the chamber, where a large door stood sealed by metal plates. He placed his hand against the surface. Silver light spread across the door, and the metal opened with a deep echo like a giant inhale. Beyond the door stood a long tunnel that led upward toward the hills. Mira followed the stranger through the doorway. Her steps felt stronger now. The fear still lived inside her, yet hope pushed against it. As they climbed the tunnel, Mira asked how her child carried the mark. The stranger answered with calm certainty. Some humans are born with traits shaped by the old world. When the ancient machines fell silent, these traits became rare, yet they never vanished. Your child carries one of the strongest, a trait that speaks to the storm machines. That is why the storm reached for the child. That is why I had to act. Mira walked in silence for a moment. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, yet she did not fall under it. Instead, she held her baby closer and kept walking. The tunnel brightened and soon they reached the exit. The hills outside rose high and the sky above them stretched wide and open. Yet in the far distance, a dark spiral of clouds twisted slowly. The next storm was already forming. The stranger pointed toward a deep ridge that cut across the hills. Hidden under that ridge is the storm core, he said. We will enter the core chamber and shut down the machine. Once the core is silent, the storm will collapse. Mira nodded. Her breath shook, but her determination held steady. She would stand beside the stormwalker. She would face whatever danger waited within the ridge. They crossed the hills quickly. The ground vibrated more with each step. The air felt charged with strange power. Mira could sense the storm machine waking like a creature hungry for life. Her child stirred slightly, as if feeling the machine pulse. Mira whispered soft words to calm the baby. The stranger looked back at her and spoke. When we reach the core chamber, you must hold the child near the central pillar. The core will sense the trait. Then I will break the machine link. Only then will the storm end. Mira tightened her grip on her baby and followed him into the ridge. A hidden entrance opened for them as if the machine recognized the stormwalker. Inside the ridge, a wide tunnel spiraled downward. The deeper they went, the stronger the air vibrated. At last they reached a huge chamber filled with swirling white light. At the center stood the storm core, a tall pillar made of ancient metal, glowing with wild energy. The light bent and twisted around the pillar like fire trapped inside crystal. Mira stepped forward. The pillar reacted instantly. The light reached toward her child like long glowing threads. The baby opened wide eyes and gazed at the light without fear. Mira held the child close and whispered strong words of love. The stranger moved to the opposite side of the core. His silver lines blazed bright. Now he said. Mira lifted her child toward the glowing pillar. The light wrapped around the baby like warm air. The core trembled. The entire chamber shook. The stormwalker thrust his hands into the side of the pillar. Blue fire burst from his arms. The machine screamed with twisting light. Mira stood firm even as the floor shook under her feet. She held her child steady. The core light brightened, then dimmed, then brightened again. Then the chamber fell silent. The pillar darkened. The storm above the ridge crumbled into soft gray dust. The world grew still as if taking its first peaceful breath in ages. The stormwalker stepped away from the pillar. His silver lines faded to calm glow again. It is done, he said. The storm is gone. The machine is silent. Mira felt tears rise. She looked at her child, then at the stranger. Thank you, she said with full heart. The stranger nodded. The future of humans depends on those who stand for each other. Your child will grow in a safer world now. Mira stepped out of the ridge with her baby. The sky above stretched clear and wide. Behind her, the stormwalker stood tall, watching the horizon. A guardian of humans, a survivor of storms, a protector of life. Mira whispered to her child, we are safe. We are strong. And this is only the beginning. The future opened before them like a new dawn. A future shaped by courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spirit of humans.